Picture this, a posh London neighborhood, Knightsbridge. You've got Harrods just a stone's throw away, fancy tea rooms everywhere. And smack dab in the middle, you find the Ecuadorian embassy. Not exactly Buckingham Palace, but for Julian Assange, it became his very own fortress of solitude. For 7 long years. Now, embassies are weird, right? Technically, they're considered foreign soil. So stepping inside is like teleporting to another country, legally speaking. And that little loophole was about to become very, very important. Because Julian Assange, the mastermind behind WikiLeaks, was a man on the run. He'd pissed off some powerful people, spilled secrets that governments would rather keep buried. Assange was staring down the barrel of extradition, a one-way ticket to face some very serious charges. Finding himself in a diplomatic pickle, he decided to play his trump card political asylum. And who better to grant him refuge than a country with a bone to pick with the US? Ecuador, under President Rafael Correa, was more than happy to poke the eagle, offering Assange a way out. So, in 2012, Assange walked through those embassy doors and into a bizarre, self-imposed exile. Little did he know it would be a long 7 years before he'd breathe fresh air again. Before we dive into the legal rabbit hole, let's talk about the man at the center of it all, Julian Assange. Born in Australia, Assange was a computer whiz kid with a rebellious streak a mile wide. He saw himself as a truth teller, a crusader against secrecy and government overreach. In 2006, he founded WikiLeaks, an online platform built on a radical idea: total transparency. Think of it as a digital Dropbox where whistleblowers could anonymously expose wrongdoing, no matter how powerful the perpetrators. Governments and corporations, they hated it. Journalists, they had a field day. Assange, with his shock of white hair and piercing blue eyes, quickly became an international figure. Some hailed him as a hero, a champion of free speech. Others branded him a dangerous radical, a reckless enemy of the state. Love him or hate him, one thing was clear. Assange was a man who knew how to make headlines. Now let's talk about the bombshells that WikiLeaks dropped. Because these weren't just your run-of-the-mill leaks. We're talking about a fire hose of classified information, exposing everything from war crimes to diplomatic backstabbing. In 2010, WikiLeaks really blew the lid off things. Remember Chelsea Manning, the US Army intelligence analyst? She leaked hundreds of thousands of classified documents to WikiLeaks. We're talking about war logs from Iraq and Afghanistan, exposing civilian casualties, torture, and all sorts of stuff that made the Pentagon sweat. Then came Cablegate, over 250,000 diplomatic cables laid bare for the world to see. It was like eavesdropping on the world's most awkward cocktail party. Suddenly, everyone knew what diplomats really thought of each other. Let's just say it didn't make for very friendly relations. These leaks sent shockwaves across the globe. Governments were scrambling, reputations were ruined, and the public got a rare glimpse behind the curtain of power. Assange was public enemy number 1 for some, but for others, he was a folk hero. The question was, at what cost? Okay, so here's where things get really complicated. In 2010, amidst all the WikiLeaks chaos, Swedish authorities issued an arrest warrant for Assange. The charges: sexual assault allegations from 2 women he'd met during a trip to Stockholm. Assange denied the allegations, claiming the whole thing was a politically motivated setup. He feared that if extradited to Sweden, he'd be left vulnerable. His biggest fear? Extradition to the US, where he was under investigation for espionage related to the WikiLeaks publications. See, the US government was fuming about the leaks. They wanted Assange's head on a platter, and they were looking for any excuse to get their hands on him. Assange believed that the Swedish case was just a convenient way to get him on a plane to America, where he could face a lifetime behind bars. Now, the Swedish authorities insisted that their investigation was legitimate and separate from any US interests. But Assange wasn't taking any chances. He was convinced that this was all part of a grand conspiracy to silence him and make an example out of WikiLeaks.